Hey, this is a quick one to let you know about Pendulate from Newfangled Audio. Hey, so Pendulate is a really interesting new monosynth from Newfangled Audio, and I wanted to explain a little bit about how it works, show off some of the major controls to you, and really encourage you to go grab a copy because it's free and it's probably the best thing to happen in 2020. And there will be a download link below. All right, so Pendulate is based around the idea of a double pendulum, which is kind of a physics idea of two pendulums connected. In fact, let's explain it better with some science. Okay, so today we're in the T-Mech automotive department because I want to show you a little example of what a double pendulum looks like. You're probably very familiar with a regular pendulum. So here I have constructed one. We've got an arm holding a bit of string and we've got a weight on the end of it. And I've added a pink dot so that it's a bit easier to see. Now, if I swing the pendulum, we get a nice smooth back and forward motion, which if you think about that traveling over time, so going out and back again and out and back again, you can kind of draw that like a sine wave, right? It's a really simple shape. It goes up, it comes down, and over time, you could make it look like a sine wave. There's this thing known as a double pendulum, which is where you take a weight and another weight on the same piece of string. And the interaction between the two pendulums can be really quite complex. Let's make a couple. So we've got a single pendulum here, and I've set it up so that you can see that it swings really nice and neatly. There's no trickery here just yet. Now, when I add a second pendulum into this, this is where things start to get kind of interesting. So I'll put it here. Now, just off camera is the top of the thing, but there's essentially a 1/3 to 2/3 kind of relationship here in the lengths of the string. So now when I swing the pendulum, we get a little more chaos. And you can see that depending on if we track the top one or the bottom one, we get a slightly different resulting movement. And obviously, if we give it a little push, we can introduce all sorts of chaos into this system. So one of the main ways we can control the effect is by raising or lowering our middle pendulum. And this changes the relationship between the top and the bottom. So we're getting plenty of different movement there as the two cycles of the length of time it takes for the pendulum to swing are interacting. All right, so what's going on there and why is it interesting? Well, depending on the weights and the lengths of the string, the pendulum wants to move at a particular rate. And the interaction between those forces a kind of a feedback between the first and the second pendulum node as they get pushed around by the other one. And it's a really chaotic system. And so why it's interesting today is that Newfangled Audio have released Pendulate, which is a monosynth based around this idea of a double pendulum creating the oscillator sounds. Let's check that out. Okay, let's check out a few of these presets. So this is the init preset. That's pretty nasty. Let's modulate it a little. Let's turn animate up and chaos down. So yeah, it's got some heft. It can do some pretty crazy stuff. Let's check out a preset, leads. Well, that's pretty similar. Ooh. Oh, that's nice. Is that tempo locked? Yeah. Wow, you could score a Nolan movie with this. Nice. What else we got? Plucks. Oh. So yeah, it's got some character. Let's have a look at one more before we go through an explanation. Maybe Cruiser. Cool, so what's going on there? Okay, this is Pendulate, and as you can see, there is a couple of different sections. We have double pendulum, we have Wavefolder, we got low pass gate, and then we've got all the control stuff down here. So we've got a global section, an ADSR, an LFO, and the output levels. Let's go section by section. We're going to start with the double pendulum because we've already talked about pendulums a little bit today. So the interesting thing here is if you kind of pull the chaos amount down to 0, you get just basically a sine wave. I've set up the low pass gate, so we're just playing kind of a bell kind of a patch at the moment. And I've dragged the chaos amount all the way to 0, so we just get a nice pure sine wave. So it's kind of like our single pendulum, right? It's just doing a nice smooth back and forwards. Let's introduce some chaos amount to that and basically bring in kind of the second pendulum of our double pendulum oscillator. We can hear that there's a bit of variation creeping into that sine. A few more additional harmonics. Let's increase the chaos shape a bit. You can hear it's getting a little more piercing. I'm actually going to change the patch here. Let's bring the sustain all the way up, and that way I can sweep through these and show you what happens. So at some point the chaos shape just gets completely out of control. Let's bring it back down. And let's give it more chaos amount. So this chaos shape will begin to take effect more because the amount is coming up. So you can hear that the two main controls in this oscillator are the chaos amount and the chaos shape. And as you introduce more chaos, you get more chaotic harmonics being generated. So the chaos amount and the chaos shape are kind of the main controls here. The animate is the third major control, and it's a bit of a strange one. What it does is it detunes the pitch of the chaos oscillator and the main oscillator. The best way to understand that is for me to just wind it on gently. Here we go. So there you can hear some movement between the two oscillators that are interacting. So the chaos shape is kind of controlling how chaotic the second oscillator is. The chaos amount is controlling its impact on the main oscillator, and the animate is detuning those two against each other. Let's wind the animate all the way up. And you get all sorts of moving, twisting sounds out of this chaotic oscillator. That's why I think it's so interesting. Let's get through the rest of these controls. Now this sets the harmonic relationship of the second oscillator or the chaos oscillator to the first. So at uni, they're basically in unison. So it's not particularly interesting. That's essentially having two lengths of string on our pendulum that are the same length. But we can select one of these more harmonically complex relationships with the original oscillator. So minor seventh. And we get a much more complex oscillation because we're throwing in a strange harmonic relationship to the chaos oscillator. We can also sync the chaos oscillator, which kind of drops it an octave for some reason, but it also adds all sorts of like grittiness and strange artifacts. And then we've got two different sub oscillators. Now that's really interesting because if we bring down sub 1, that's 1 octave below the main voice. And sub 2 is 2 octaves below the main voice. So we can have a really rich, moving, harmonically dense top end and then a nice pure underneath, which I'm all about nice clean subs, right? So that's it for the double pendulum oscillator. I find it really exciting. I think it's really interesting. It's weird. It's kooky. I love it because the animate button gives us like controls which modulate over time, and the chaos oscillator gives us just kind of like really harmonically dense sounds to start with. So wavefolders are more common in like modular or West Coast synthesis than they are as part of a traditional subtractive synthesizer, but you should be kind of getting the impression this isn't a regular subtractive synthesizer at this point, which is one of the reasons I like Pendulate. All right, so let's look at this wavefolder. At the moment, I've got the mix all the way down. I'll play a note and I'll bring it in. So not a huge amount of change there, but if we add more folds, we get a more wave-folded signal. mean, that's just tearing. It's super crazy. I love symmetry. I think that it controls the symmetry of the wavefolding between the positive and negative side. So let's sweep this around a bit with folds at maximum. Cool, we get a fair bit of like modulation potential there, although it is a little subtle. And we've got cutoff, which is a really gentle low pass filter on top of this. So we can kind of dull the sound off if it gets too intense. Around about there might be nice. All right, now we've got another West Coast idea, which is a low pass gate. So it's a combination of an amplitude envelope and a low pass filter. It's pretty straightforward. There's a frequency, you can set a resonance, you can set a number of poles. So at the moment we've got no resonance. Let's wind that up. Cool, that's a pretty classic resonant filter sound. We can sweep the filter frequency around. And of course, we've got an ADSR built into this, so we can create a nice short decay. Or we can open it right up. Or we could even sweep into a short decay. Yeah. Okay, so in the global section, we've got an octave control, we've got a pitch bend, which sets the amount of pitch bend from your pitch bend knob, and we've got a portamento time, which sets the like legato glide time between notes. You can also set it to legato mode or tell it to always be in legato mode. And stereo. Ooh. And we've got my latest discovery, this stereo button, which turns it into a stereo oscillator. Amazing. Now, while we're down here, this is the perfect time to talk about modulation options. You can see that you've got velocity, mod wheel, key press, pressure, timbre, and then you've got a full ADSR, an AD, and an AR envelope output, and you've got LFO outputs here. Now, the cool thing about modulation assignments in Pendulate is that you just click them once, and a whole bunch of additional boxes turn up. So we're going to use this as our modulation source, and to select a destination we just grab one of these boxes and we push up or down. So now I've put an envelope on our drive and folds amount. Let's open this up. And so suddenly we're pushing our drive and folds amounts around. Now to clear those assignments, you just right click and that resets the box. It's a really fast, easy way to work. And the other thing is that you can operate in reverse. If I know I want to modulate the drive amount, I can click it first, and then a box appears over all of the modulation positions that could control it. And I can use those boxes to set an assignment, which then if I click the plus again, I can still see that assignment in either direction. So that brings us to the LFO. You can tempo lock it, or you can have it unlocked from the tempo. And it's got multiple different shape outputs. So in this case, I've used triangle output, but we could take other outputs and we could assign them to all sorts of things. Let's put the square on frequency, and maybe we'll use a saw on the animate. And so now we've added additional modulation outputs from our LFO using different shapes to different areas. We've got a pretty crazy sound happening there already. So what does all this mean? It means that you've got a really complex, chaotic oscillator, which is heaps of fun. It's not quite unpredictable. You do get used to the territory that it can traverse, but it's got a lot of flavor and character to it. It's really fun and interesting to play with. You've got a Wavefolder, which will really rough up a sound or give it some real edge. And then you've got a low-pass gate, which is kind of a combination of an envelope and a low-pass filter, which is a really nice way to control dynamics and harmonic content simultaneously. It gives you a really pleasant combination of envelope and low pass filter. It's really great for plucky kind of sounds. It can also just get out of your way if you want a loud sustained sound. The addition of the sub oscillators for me is really powerful because it makes it really easy to create like a textured top layer based on the chaos oscillator, and then to just reinforce it nicely underneath. You can even work an octave or two above your target pitch to get something that's really nice in the mid-range, and then just reinforce it a little with the subs. And I think the modulation capability is really fun and intuitive. Eventually, you just wind up clicking things to see what they do. Like what happens if I put folds to the modulation wheel? What happens if I put mix on the key tracking? What happens if I take this ADSR and put it onto the resonance? There's just a lot of fun to be had clicking around and assigning things fairly chaotically to see where they wind up. This is what this sound has wound up like. Yeah, so this is a lot of fun for those moving, interesting sounds which just kind of form out of playing around. It really does feel like a piece of modular or a weird West Coast synthesizer where it kind of encourages you to just play with it and see what pops out. But yeah, definitely for me, it's one of the most interesting releases of software that I've seen in a long time. I want to make a special note that I haven't heard it alias at all. With this much distortion and chaos added into a synthesizer, I would have expected it to have some kind of downsides, like to alias really hideously when it gets into the higher notes, and it just doesn't. It generally sounds pretty good. It can get out of control and noisy, but that's part of the fun of it. I hope you enjoy it. All right, that was my quick dive into Pendulate. Thank you so much for watching. Thank you so much to Newfangled Audio for releasing such a complex and weird kind of synthesizer. I think it's a really exciting, fun experiment, and I really hope you enjoy it as well.